you have to do some inferencing based off of this political cartoon. So I know you have not read ahead, but I am going to help you out a little bit with this image because we won't have an e-session next week. So same thing, I give you questions to help get your thinking, and you're going to be presented with this chart that you've done quite a few times. So you're looking for textual support, background knowledge, and then your inference. So let's first start with just sharing in the comment box, what are things you see in this image? What are things you can see or read? And I have this image too. If it's a little hard for you to read here, I do have it in color, and I'll share that in the comment box. So take a moment and just write in the comment box, share what you see in this image. So we're working on that textual support column. Okay, so the guys at the desk there who are working, so where do you think this is? What do you think this picture is of? What place do you think it's happening? Okay, so the Senate, right. So this is Congress. So, and you know it's the Senate because if you look in the sign, it says Trust Senate. It says 17th Amendment. Okay, nice job. So if you look here, all these people at the desk are your senators. Who's influencing your senators, though? Who's those big fat guys? Oil, trust, copper. Nice job. And the name of this image, if you can read it on the very bottom, it's easier to see in the colored one. It's called the Bosses of the Senate. So your textual support would be that you can see on their shirt that they say Steel Trust, Copper Trust. They're big fat guys who are basically hoovering or hovering over the senators. What can you infer based off of your background knowledge of big business in the 1890s? You know they're monopolists because they entered the monopolist door. So what can we infer? So we know big business is on the rise in the early 20th century. We know now we have these big trusts that are standing there watching over the senators. They entered through the monopolist. So monopolists are just people who control the entire industry. So it would be having a monopoly of something means you control all of it. So like you control all the railroads, or you control, they have powerful businessmen, but they control all of something. So it would be like if DirecTV was the only type of TV you could own, that there wasn't like Charter, there wasn't AT&T, Uverse. It would be like you have a stronghold over one business. So good job, Eric. So you are inferring that they could manipulate the senators, right, into passing laws or not passing laws that please them. So think about that as a business person. You don't want the senators passing laws that cost you money. So if you make your workers, if they pass laws limiting immigration, you no longer have immigrant workers, and what are you probably going to have to do then with your workers? If they're not immigrants, what are you going to have to pay them probably? So think about that as a business person. You don't want the senators passing laws that cost you money. So if you make your workers, if they pass laws limiting immigration, you no longer have immigrant workers, and what are you probably going to have to do then with your workers? If they're not immigrants, what are you going to have to pay them probably? Right, more money, a more respectable wage. Right, so these big businessmen probably don't want Congress making laws limiting the workday, because if they have to hire more employees, that takes from their profits. They probably don't want these senators influencing who they can hire and restricting that, because that could hurt their profit margin. They probably don't want them passing laws that regulate consumer protection, because if they have to hire people to inspect their product, it's going to cost them more money and take more money out of their piggy bank. So can you see how they're influencing Senate? So you have coal, you have copper, you have all these big business monopolists that are influencing Congress. And why is the Senate listening to them? So the different trusts just represent different businesses. Right, because they have a lot of money. And if you remember, one of the big things that the populists wanted was they wanted the direct election of senators rather than those who had money and influence to be able to choose who their senators are. So there's senators here that they got into office. So big business helps get the senators their position in Senate. So the Senate now feels like they have to pass laws that make their constituents happy. So their constituents are big business. Because if they're not passing laws that make big business happy, what's going to happen to their position in the Senate? Right here. They're blackmailing them. So what's going to happen to the senator's position if they don't keep these big, fat trusts happy, these monopolists happy? Right, they will stop funding certain senators, and will those senators probably have their position anymore? Probably not, right? So looking at that sign in the middle center of the cartoon, so it says, this is the Senate, and it goes on to say, of the monopolist, for the monopolist. How do you think the American public would respond to that? So that's what that middle sign is saying. Right. That it's not saying that the Senate is for the people, of the people, that they serve the American citizens or people. Instead, saying they serve big business. They only care about big business. If you are not big business, they don't want to hear you. That entrance on the top level, that big entrance, you can probably see it better in the colored one. What does it say across the door? So it says people's entrance, and what does it say across the door? You can see it better in the colored one. Closed. So they don't care about whose view. Yeah. And whose view did they not care about then? They closed out who from the discussion in Senate? Right, the citizens, the people. So for your chart that you have to do, so it's the same thing as previous week, where you have to have 3 textual supports. So you could write about the big fat trust and explain your background knowledge of what trusts are and what monopolies are and what you can infer about their influence on the Senate. Your other textual support could be about the signs or the door. Either of those would work for number 2 and 3. So you can talk about the signs, you can talk about the senators being there and how they're small in comparison to the big businessmen. And then you would talk about your background knowledge, and you would talk about how the senators weren't directly elected by the people, and how monopolies and trusts had an influence and big business had an influence, and that they wouldn't want them to pass laws that would hinder them making money, and how you would infer then that big business really was influencing our government and our Senate and the laws that were passed more than the general public, and how they were benefiting the monopolists and kept the monopolists thriving while on the backs of the American people, essentially. So then you also are presented with those same questions, those same 4 questions you've been presented with in the past. So what was the author's purpose for writing this piece? So do you think he liked big business? Do you think he liked monopolists? What was he trying to expose to the public? What do you think the author's purpose was? What was he trying to expose to the public? Right, exactly. So he's trying to inform the public that the Senate doesn't care about them, that the proposals that the senators make, and not telling them who they originally made them for, right? The purpose of the legislation they're passing is for the monopolists, not for the people. So it's obviously from the viewpoint of a common person. You can look up who Joseph Kepler is, the person who created it. You can look up information about the 17th Amendment, which if you're looking at my colored image I have, it tells you more background information about that image. So feel free to use information you found on that website. And what bias or point of view does the author have on this topic? So he's obviously biased in that he doesn't represent the monopolist and that he is more for the people than for big business. Does that affect the credibility? Did big business and trust really have that much of an influence on the Senate? So you have to support your position with your chapter reading for next week and of the little bit of research you do more on that political cartoon in that time period. So you're really using your background knowledge to support your response to number 3. And how does the relationship between government and how does this reflect the relationship between government and business? So I'll leave you with that question. What do you think? How does that image, how does this cartoon reflect the relationship of government and big business? You want to respond in the comment box. What is the relationship like between government and big business? So this obviously reflects that government is being controlled, right, by big business. That big business has a huge influence on what the government does and what they pass. Okay, so let's